Hello and welcome to Bud's RPG Review, where I give my thoughts on role-playing games, card games and board games. Welcome to part 3 of my review of Night Below. In this video I'll be covering the third and final book, The Sunless Sea. The cover is the same as the box set, so really there's not much to see here. The first thing we're greeted with is a map of the Sunless Sea, with all of the places of interest marked upon it. The sea itself sits inside a colossal cavern that is 45 miles long and 35 miles wide. First up, it advises that the players should be around 9th to 11th level before tackling this part of the campaign, and then it goes on to discuss the relationships that the players might have made at this point, most prominently the Sverfneblen and the Rockseers. It is conceivable at this stage that the Sverfneblen may have abandoned the characters due to them allying with the Darrow, but should the players give the Crown of Darrow control to the Sverfneblen, they are deeply grateful and the players are presented with some scrolls. The Deep Gnomes know of the Great Cavern below, although it is somewhere that they avoid, but they can give the players some information on the parts of the cavern that they have scryed. More interesting is the developments with the Rockseers. After the characters have defeated the City of the Glass Pool, they are sent for by Aljaira, who can give them some advice on what they have seen creature-wise so far, and they will identify the Ixan to the characters. The more pressing matter is the unrest that the players have caused amongst the Rockseers. Many of them want to make contact with their kin on the surface world. The burden of their self-perceived cowardice of retreating to the Underdark during Corellan's battle with Lolth weighs heavy upon them, but they see it as taking positive steps. They ask for the PC's help in sending some emissaries to an elven community on the surface world. This monumental moment of the revelation of a new subspecies of elf should be played for maximum effect. Aljaira advises that the Sunless Sea is a vast underground lake that sits in a cavern with many side passages and that the waters hide Ixan, vast eels and... He pauses for dramatic effect, the aboleth. He reveals that this is where the slaves have been taken and what they are constructing, warning the players to beware the aboleth. Their domination powers ensure that they have many slaves and servitors. He also warns them that the Ixan have a citadel in the Sunless Sea and that there is a place called the Isle of Shadows that contains a brooding evil. He suggests the players avoid it entirely. He then presents the players with a map of the Sunless Sea and once again warns the players of the danger of Great Shaboath. Following this are some notes on how the players should prepare for the travel to the Sunless Sea, and it gives information on what a sage could tell them about the aboleth. Next up is the Great Cavern. The cavern is dimly lit due to the mould that grows here, and it is the equivalent of pale moonlight. The floor of the cavern is strewn with moss, lichen and rocks and stones, with insects feeding on their decaying matter. All creatures here are albino and blind. The sea itself has a very slow flow with little changes in the water level. The cavern, although vastly long, is only 550 feet high at its highest point. The first encounter it details here is the Deranged Darrow. This group were originally accompanied to the city by Darlakanen, but disastrous experiments drove them even more insane than a Darrow normally is, and they fled. They suffer from hallucinations, and their savants are easily distracted when trying to use magic. They are wholly impossible to negotiate with, indeed the only hope the players have of communicating with them is if they have the Crown of Darrow command. Following this we have the Rift of the Fire Giants. This takes place in and around a large volcanic fissure. The players can encounter a group of fire giants on a pilgrimage to sacrifice riches in the lava to the fire giant god Surta. There is an encounter with a group of Tanari. It involves a desperate monolith called Lilianth, who has been sent to destroy a pit fiend that resides in Great Shaboath. However, she realises that her and a group of 2 Allo fiends and a succubus are seriously outgunned for the task, as they are forbidden to gate in any reinforcements. She and her companions all appear in shape-changed human form and will have no qualms about making a deal with the players to assist in this, although this may cause issues for paladins and clerics. Being both chaotic and evil, there's every chance that they will, upon fulfilling their goal, attack the party, or they may even just wave goodbye and leave. It's up to the DM. Following the Tanari we have the Renegade Illithids. This group is led by an Illithid cleric called Ixan, and again the players may be able to forge an alliance with them to stop the aboleth. If the players choose to try and parley with the Illithids, Ixan can tell them what the aboleth are constructing within the city. The Illithids can be great help to the players, although forging an alliance with genius-level lawful evil creatures has its own set of obstacles to overcome. The encounter detailed after this one is the one that the players will have been waiting for, potentially for a very long time. In a nondescript side passage, the players find an ancient tomb where they can come across a worn-out but very much alive young female wizard, Jeleneth. She's barely recognisable from the picture the players have. Her black hair is hacked short and her clothes are barely rags. She also bears many scars from repeated beatings. If they manage to convince her that they are there to help her, she tells the players that she managed to resist all attempts to charm her and eventually managed to leap overboard as she was being ferried over to Great Shabawa. Somehow, she managed to make it to the shore alive and has been trying to find her way back home. She found the route through the City of the Glass Pool to be too dangerous, so she's been holed up in this cave. She was completely cut off from her spellbook, but has managed to pick up some thief skills in the meantime. She is at this point a 3rd level wizard, 5th level thief. Using a spellbook she found on a dead wizard, she has summoned the familiar, a strange ferret-like creature called Joyle. We now have some other encounters that the DM can use, including a group of stone giants that have been turned evil by a baneful monolith, a crazed exiled drow called Otel Eris who thinks that he is a minor god of fungus and is forming a small army with a wand of plant charming, and a group of Deo miners who are extracting gems and who are in possession of a Tarask plate, which if obtained can be forged into an incredibly impressive +5 shield. There is some information on traversing the Sunless Sea, and this leads us on to Sander's Isle. This is a place where an evil enchanter called Sander is holed up. She has fled the surface world to escape her many enemies and is studying the Aboleth and their domination experiments. She is paranoid in extremis and a difficult foe who has some interesting notes that the players could find useful in their ongoing fight. After this is the Isle of Shadows. This is a bleak ruin surrounded in perpetual cold, black mist and fog. It radiates a palpable evil up to 200 feet, and without magical protection against cold, players will take damage just by entering the area. The isle has strange monolithic statues around the shoreline that radiate necromancy. This isle was once the home of a cult of the lost, dark god Tharasdan. Light is extremely muted here, and the players would do well to avoid exploring this place, as curses and undead are what it contains. If the players do manage to explore it, they should eventually come across Varandek, an undead priest servitor of Tharasdan. Following this, we have the Pyramid of the Ixan. This floating island is an artificial structure constructed by the Aboleth slaves and contains many powerful Ixan wizards and even a vampiric Ixan priest of their foul god Ilxendron. There are a few other islands like the Isle of Derangement, which is ruled over by a kraken of the Sunless Sea, and Giza Rock, which is the home of Jazarithiel, a Wastrelith Tanari. If Lilianth is present, their personal grudge becomes apparent. There is also Sunken Home, which is a long-abandoned drow settlement where the Kraken of the Isle of Derangement lives, along with a rare drow banshee. Finally, we have notes on preparing for the final battle. It covers scrying Great Shabawath and the various allies that the players may have made at this point. This includes a section called Farewell to the Rockseers. The Rockseer emissaries to the surface have been well received, and they have learned of a hill or mountain range close to the surface elves that they could live in. They've taken the decision to end their isolation and leave the Underdark for a new life among their kin. They feel sad that they are leaving their home, but excited that an adventure awaits them. More than that, something miraculous has transpired. Corellin Larethian has sent an avatar to visit the Rockseers and has assured them his forgiveness and blessing. The players may even witness this genuinely historical and awe-inspiring event. The Rockseers are deeply grateful to the players, and at this point Algiera gives the players every bit of information he has on the Aboleth, Great Shabawath and their towers, as he's been scrying on it for some time. He advises the players that they will need water-breathing magic, and that there are Bartesu emissaries there. He tells them all about the Savant Aboleth, and that he knows that there is a magical flux point somewhere within the city that the Aboleth are unaware of. His final gift to the players is a powerful Helm of Brilliance. Next up is the final destination, the City of the Aboleth, Great Shabawath. This section details the city, its patrols and its buildings. It's advised that at the point the players begin their assault upon the city, that the DM should begin a time track leading up to a point where the towers will finally become active. The players have only 30 days to defeat the Aboleth before the towers are complete and the domination effect takes place. It details how the Aboleth will respond to the players' hit-and-run tactics, the magical resistances the city has, as well as the slaves that are captive in there. The players can, under certain circumstances, enter without violence. The descriptions cover the basic structure of Great Shabawath, including things like the gatehouse and the Kuatoa army quarters. In the Towers of Distillations is an evil wizard called Shalzarith, who is assisting a Savant Aboleth. It details the Illithid quarters and a particularly powerful mercenary band called the Raveners who live in the city. These will provide a stern challenge to the party should they end up facing them. It details a slave block where the players can rescue a wizard sage called Krelna, who has defeated all attempts of charm and domination due to his int and wisdom of 18. If Jeleneth is with the party, she can vouch for him. You can tell the players exactly what the Aboleth are doing in the Great Towers and how to destroy them. The players need to use magic of the opposed school to that the tower is dedicated. For example, the Tower of Necromancy needs illusion phantasm magic to defeat it. He advises that there are 4 towers ringed around the Grand Central Tower and that the Central Tower can only be annulled if the 4 surrounding towers are destroyed. Following this, we have the embassy of the Bartesu, where the players can meet Palestrin the Pit Fiend. Palestrin is currently in a human form and will provide a deadly challenge if they're up to facing him in combat. Other Bartesu live in here, such as an Erinyes, 4 Hamatula and 12 Nuparebos. Palestrin's treasure includes a trapped astral diva called Colima who can assist the players if freed. We then have the Tower of Treasures. This is the place where all of the magic items taken from kidnapped victims are stored. It's heavily protected by stone golems and necrophidiae, but contains vast wealth for the players to plunder. And finally, at long last, we have the Tower of Domination itself. It's actually a complex that has 4 great towers surrounding a central tower. It's worth pointing out that the complex is mostly underwater, which could be something that the players have difficulty tackling. The first place of interest is the Tower of Alteration. In this tower, abjuration spells only work in one place. There's a chamber on the 2nd level that contains a savant aboleth of some power and a hemispherical mass of raw magical energy. This mass has 57 magical force units or MFUs. These can only be depleted by casting abjuration spells at it, and 1 MFU can be removed per level of the spell. For example, Protection from Evil would remove 1. We have the other 3 towers, the Tower of Necromancy, the Tower of Summonings and the Tower of Enchantments. Each are guarded by powerful aboleth savants and a host of golems and undead. When the MFU scores of the 4 peripheral towers are reduced to 25, they can enter the Grand Savant's Tower in the centre, but only when they are reduced to 0 can they enter the Grand Savant's Chamber. This is the culmination of the campaign. Here they encounter the altar of the Blood Queen, the foul goddess of the aboleth. Needless to say, the resistance to the players is incredibly strong here, with aboleth savants and giants giving them cause for concern. On the 3rd floor, the players eventually meet the Derrow Darlakanand, the Great Enchanter. He is 18th level and his first action is to drop a time stop on the players and then berating them for underestimating his genius. A flawed game mechanic, as due to the nature of the time stop spell, the players would be completely unaware of what he said, but then what do you expect from an insane Derrow? If the players manage to defeat him, the campaign culminates in a battle with the Grand Savant itself. This aboleth is an albino horror that is huge in size and very powerful, and you should expect players to be challenged to the very edge of their abilities. Should they finally defeat the Grand Savant, the 4 towers begin to crumble and topple, sinking Great Shaboath back into the waters of the Sunless Sea. The players are rewarded the princely sum of 100,000 experience points for their success. Night Below seems to be a campaign that divides people. Some people consider it a meat-grinding Monty Hall-style jaunt, but frankly, I disagree. I come from perhaps the fortunate position of having played Night Below and then subsequently running it, and there is just so much more to it than that. Book 1 does a great job of setting the scene and expectations. Using the optional training rules is something that in this case I actually agree with, and Haranshire, while not overly prescribed to any particular setting by design, feels like a fairly bleak place to live. It's replete with its own myths and superstitions, and following the breadcrumb trail of clues to the entrance to the Underdark gives a real feeling of accomplishment. Book 2 is a pleasure to play and run, as the Underdark encounters are not the run-of-the-mill kind that you would expect, and the introduction of the Rockseer Elves definitely challenges any preconceptions that the players could have. The effort put into making the Underdark denizens stand out from the usual fare is to be applauded. In fact, almost everything up to the City of the Glass Pool is great, but this is where the book has a misstep. It remains my belief that the City of the Glass Pool was really not suited for 2nd edition AD&D. There are too many high-powered individuals that the DM has to keep track of, and when I ran it, this was a point where my players started to lose interest. The hit-and-run nature of how you were expected to deal with it felt really disjointed. Having 2 or 3 encounters then retreating made it feel like little was actually being accomplished, as the players are generally unaware of the social collapse that they are engineering behind the scenes. Book 3 feels slightly disjointed too. The exploration of the Great Cavern of the Sunless Sea is so much more interesting than Great Shaboath itself. I appreciate that the final encounters with the aboleth in the Towers of Domination are meant to be challenging, but they're at times deadly in extremis and pretty mean-spirited. One theme that runs through the campaign is that of alliances. The people that the characters help and are helped by on the surface world directly impacts their rate of progression, and similarly the alliances with the Sverf Nebula and Rockseers are vital to success. The involvement in the journey of the Rockseers from hiding in shame in the Underdark to rejoining their kin on the surface and being forgiven by their god feels much more satisfying than the actual culmination of the campaign, and the rescue of Jellineth should have been a much bigger deal than it was, and far less optional. When I played and ran it, it was something that nobody forgot about and remained our purpose as a loose end we had to tie. One final point to note is the Underdark elephant in the room. I'm not sure if you noticed in the review, but there was an Underdark staple that was for the most part missing from the campaign: the drow. If you discount the drow banshee in the final sections, there's literally only one encounter with a single drow in the entire campaign, and that's optional. They don't even appear on any of the random encounter tables throughout. The effort put in by the writer to put together something of this scale without involving the drow is an admirable accomplishment, and dare I say, a refreshing change. Also, the focus on the players having to use their wits and negotiating abilities is a definite plus point, although as previously mentioned, later editions of D&D would probably handle this far better than 2nd edition, as it wasn't exactly known for its robust skill system. I originally recorded this video a few years ago and decided to re-record it as the audio and video quality left a lot to be desired, but in addition to this I was asked a number of times in the comments for some advice on running it, so my advice would be as follows. System-wise, I would recommend using either Old School Essentials or D&D 5th edition if you want something closer to the original, or if you're feeling brave, convert it to 4th edition, as I believe it is a system that would make the encounters flow in a more satisfactory manner, as well as making the challenges of raising SCP levels in the City of the Glass Pool easier by using the skill challenge mechanics. I would also use the training rules as a method of absorbing the vast riches that the players could obtain during the campaign, or alternatively just reduce it down. Additionally, choose your world setting and then make the adjustments in advance so that it has the right fit. I played and ran it using the World of Greyhawk campaign setting, but somewhere far away from the Sword Coast in an uninteresting part of the Forgotten Realms would probably be a good fit too. Another option is to run it as it was intended, accepting the peculiarities of AD&D for what they are and the vision of Carl Sargent. Another thing I would do is to covertly encourage the presence of an elf in the party, as it makes the scenes with the Rockseers much more meaningful, but avoid allowing players who get wind of the campaign that you're going to play and stopping them playing races that are comfortable in the Underdark, such as the Sverfneblum. The whole idea behind this is that the players are out of their element, and you probably shouldn't be making it easy for them. I would completely avoid using the drow in any capacity in the campaign beyond what's already here. It was a design choice to make it this way, and one that you don't generally see that often. And on a personal note, I feel that they've become somewhat unwieldy and watered down over the years. For supplemental material, I would advise picking up a copy of the superb Lamentations of the Flame Princess sourcebook, Veins of the Earth, as it contains incredibly useful material for settings deep underground. Though it is worth mentioning that some of the authors of that book have courted some serious controversy in recent years, which may or may not be a consideration for you. Night Below is simply a great, if not one of the great campaigns. You could literally get years of play from the campaign, and the unfolding story should capture the attention of even the most jaded player. If you want the original box set, the real issue is availability. The price at time of writing is fairly hefty, but fortunately it is available as a complete PDF and print on demand for a relatively cheap price. Night Below is an old favourite of mine. Reading through it again for this review made it all come flooding back to me, and it was a pleasure, at least for a week or two, to immerse myself back into a time and place where Jellineth needs rescuing, a strange race of elves are seeking forgiveness, and an evil beyond the understanding of mortal minds seeks to dominate the surface world. I give Night Below a 9.5 out of 10. If you enjoyed this review, please make sure to hit the thumbs up, subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos. Also, if you're interested in buying this product, put some links below. Lastly, if you like what I produce here, then maybe think about supporting me on Patreon or even becoming a member of my YouTube channel. Bud out.